up right now. Okay. Hi, everyone. I'm Danny Aqua from Teach Florida, Executive Director, and thank you all so much for joining us today for this webinar with many of Florida's Orthodox elected officials. Sorry about the background, 1 second. All right, sorry about that. Let's start again. Okay. Hi, I'm Danny Aqua, Executive Director of Teach Florida. Thank you so much for joining us for today's panel with many of Florida's Orthodox elected officials. As you know, we are an advocacy organization for Jewish day school scholarship and security funding. We also do other programs like the kosher food program, anything relating to government advocacy. And part of that is engaging our community in the civic process. And so we have many of our elected officials from our community here today to talk you through what it means to be in public service, why they got into public service, how you can get into public service as we continue advocating for the things that mean so much to our community. So I just want to introduce our moderator today, Avi Nader, who is a lay leader here in Hollywood, Florida. He's involved in everything in our community, really a superstar. He and his wife, Deborah, are involved in education as well, which is a big passion for them. So without further ado, Avi, thank you so much for hosting today.
Thank you, Danny. And before I start to introduce our great group of panelists today, I just also wanted to commend you and the work done by Teach Florida. You know, I've watched this organization grow from when it started almost 10 years ago, and what you guys have managed to achieve, and the, you know, both in terms of a voice and an awareness of the needs of Jewish education down in Florida, but even more specifically in terms of the funding that you've been able to secure through your various initiatives is incredible and really to be commended. And, you know, for those who are not familiar with the work that Teach Florida does, I highly encourage you to get familiar with it, because it's an incredible organization that has done an enormous amount to alter the trajectory of Jewish education down here in Florida. So very pleased to be affiliated with Teach Florida, and thank you for the work that you guys do. We'll start by just introducing our panelists that are here today. We have a great group. Joining us from Israel is Congressman Peter Deutsch. Congressman Deutsch represented the 20th District of Florida in the United States Congress for 12 years, from 1993 to 2005. He served on the Foreign Affairs Committee, the Banking Committee, the Energy and Commerce Committee. He was actually the ranking Democrat on the Oversight and Investigation Subcommittee of the Commerce Committee for several years. Before entering Congress, Peter had served for 10 years as a state representative in the Florida legislature. And after Congress, Peter founded the Ben Gamla Charter School System that many of you are probably familiar with. It's the first Hebrew English public charter school system in the United States. And by now, Ben Gamla has grown to 5 locations in South Florida and educates over 2,000 students annually. So Peter has extensive experience both with politics and the legislative process and education as well. Peter, just raise your hand so we could all see you, and we'll start asking questions after we introduce all the other panelists. Mayor Gabriel Gorsman is the mayor of the town of Bal Harbour in Miami, Florida, and he's a partner at the law firm of Mellon Budwick, PA. Mayor Gorsman, in a very vocal and very public manner, has used his position as a mayor of a local township here in Florida to positively impact the Jewish community on the national level, including by passing the first municipal anti-BDS ordinance. So we're going to talk a little bit more about that, but thank you for joining us today, Mayor Gorsman. Next, we have Vice Mayor and Commissioner of the City of Miami Beach, Stephen Miner. Stephen Miner was elected Commissioner of Miami Beach in a major upset victory in late 2019 that came down literally to 2 votes. He was subsequently elected Vice Mayor of Miami Beach by his colleagues. And in addition to that, he has worked full-time as senior counsel with the United States Securities and Exchange Commission, also known as the SEC, since 2007. Vice Mayor Miner has been a strong advocate for a number of causes important to the Jewish community, including various public safety initiatives. And he played an instrumental role in Miami Beach recently becoming the first and only city in Florida to subsidize preschool's tuition for each pre-K child for the 2021 to 2022 school year. So welcome, Commissioner and Vice Mayor Miner. Now we have actually a father-son team that has joined us today. We have Council Member Isaac Salver, who for many years has been involved in local elected matters here in Florida. He was first elected to Bay Harbor Island's Town Council in 1999, and he served 2 separate terms as mayor of Bay Harbor Island and another term as vice mayor. He served on the board of directors of the Florida League of Cities since 2003 and was its most recent immediate past president. He's also chairman of the Florida Municipal Loan Council, a trustee of the Florida Municipal Investment Trust, and he has served for the past 10 years as treasurer and director of the Children's Trust and a member of the Miami-Dade County Public School Board's Audit and Budget Committee. For his day job, he leads Salver & Salver LLP, which is a CPA firm located in North Miami, Florida. And last but not least, our youngest panelist, Seth Salver, is following in the footsteps of his father by getting involved in local politics. He's a graduate of Hebrew Academy in Miami Beach, where his wife currently teaches, and he has 2 young children that attend. And he also is serving in local politics. He's been involved in the Bal Harbor Village Council since 2014, and most recently was the assistant mayor. Seth graduated from the University of Maryland. He's also a trained CPA who started his career with PricewaterhouseCoopers, and he's currently a partner and the resident tax expert at Salver & Salver LLP. So again, we have a great group with lots of experience, but also lots of varied experience, national experience, local experience, all who have in common the fact that they are Orthodox Jews. And so I think we want to highlight our content today by focusing on that first. And I'll start by asking Congressman Peter Deutsch, who perhaps with the exception of retired Senator Joe Lieberman, may be one of the most experienced Orthodox Jewish legislators in the country at the national level. Let's start right away with the $1 million question. Did you have problems in Congress as an observant Jew? Were there issues? Was it difficult for you? Were there places?
First off, let me thank you for your efforts, but also as importantly, maybe more importantly, your wife, who not everyone knows is actually the chairman of the board of Ben Gamla Schools. I know you're active in the day school, and she's active with Ben Gamla. So you're a dynamic team in terms of Jewish education, not just in South Florida, but throughout the country. So I appreciate that work that you do. And as far as I know, it's a very exclusive club. I actually believe there have only been 3 Shomer Shabbos members of the United States Congress, either Congress or Senate, since the founding of the country. Senator Lieberman, myself, and a congressman who I could figure out his name, but it was from New York in, I guess, the 20s. And I think the quick and definitive answer to your question is it wasn't a problem. And if you think about the practicality of it, obviously I knew we were going to be on this panel. I mean, I've talked about this issue a couple of times, but, really the issue is sort of Shabbos, Yontif days, and kosher. And that's really, Congress doesn't purposely not meet on the weekends, but it's very infrequent that Congress meets on the weekends. In 12 years, in Congress, my recollection is maybe literally in 12 years, twice after 9/11 and maybe the impeachment of President Clinton. So it's very, very unusual. And not only that, it's kind of a strange thing, but generally Congress doesn't meet 5 days a week. It generally meets Tuesday, or when I was there, and I don't keep track of it that closely, generally meets Tuesday or Thursday. But on Friday, so that members who live on the West Coast, has nothing to do with Shabbos, members that live on the West Coast, so they can take day flights, Congress generally ends early enough that you could take a flight to South Florida to get in before Shabbos. Although I became a mini expert in the halacha of travel. And I literally several times, I mean, you actually know where I live in Hollywood, but because of changes when you're on a plane at the gate in Washington or something, I literally walked from the airport to my house a couple of times. Both times I did that, I had a Gentile staff person sort of pick up I guess I didn't have luggage, but literally drive alongside me, because as you know, that route, it's not the safest route in the world along, I guess, Griffin Road as you're making the turn. And one time, actually, when I was coming from Miami, I got out of a cab, and walked from 441 or something. But, those are nice stories to be able to tell. And then food, is not such a big issue. Yontif days were sort of, stranger in a sense, because, Congress, this is actually when day schools or occasionally Jewish groups came to visit me, and I gave them a tour, there's a Jewish type tour of the Capitol. I usually ask two questions. There's two legislative bodies in the world that don't meet on Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. What are they? And usually people were able to guess: the Knesset and the United States Congress. The United States Congress, as far as anyone can remember, and this probably goes, I don't think it goes back 200 years, but maybe as much as 100 years, but clearly for decades has not met on Yom Kippur or Rosh Hashanah. This is actually a true story. When the Republicans took over the Congress in 1994, for the first time in 40 years, Rosh Hashanah actually became 2 days. It had only been 1 day in the Congress up until the Republican takeover in 94. When the Democrats took over again, they didn't change it back to 1 day. But they're really, maybe the first day of Passover, Congress doesn't meet, but the second day and the final 2 days, Congress definitely, if it's in the schedule, will meet. And obviously Sukkot and Shavuos are issues. But again, there wasn't really anything problematic that you can vote by pre-voting. There's a pre-voting card that you can use. So the short answer to your question, and just in terms of anyone, is it was not a big deal. I actually was thinking, though, I want to mention two sort of stories. If nothing else, people might remember from this Zoom conference. Again, my sort of comments when I asked people, on those trips, and it's not directly on point, but it's on point just in terms of Jews and Congress in America. So for any of you who've been in the United States Congress, or obviously seen it on TV, there are actually reliefs around the chamber of the world's great lawgivers. There's only one frontal relief, which is in the center chamber of the Congress, where, when you've seen it on TV, when the president walks down the center chamber of the Congress, that's the center chamber. There's a frontal relief over the center chamber, and it's literally the world's greatest lawgiver. And I can throw it out as a question: who's the world's greatest lawgiver? Anyone want to answer? Any rabbis on the call? Anyone?
We have various elected officials.
Who's the world's greatest?
Moses.
So Moshe Rabbeinu, his relief is the only frontal relief in the United States Congress. There's actually one other Jew whose relief is amongst about 18 people in there. Who would that be? And I always preface this that the building was actually built in 1860. So it couldn't be Justice Brandeis or someone. And I can give a hint. After Moses, the next Moses was?
Montefiore or?
No.
Maimonides.
Of course, the Rambam.
Okay.
The Rambam's relief is in the United States Congress. So anyway, I'll stop, although there's at least one.
No. So Peter, we want to hear more. I think what we're going to do is just go around and talk to some panelists, but I know we've got a full hour here, and we're eager to soak up as much as we can about each person's individual experience. So, the next person, one of the reasons that I know this webinar was organized was to give the community, those who attend this webinar, those who watch the recorded version of this webinar, an understanding of what it actually means to get involved in politics. And politics could be, like yourself, Peter, a U.S. representative in Congress, but it could be at the local level. And it's interesting to see that even at the local level, folks can have national impact. And one of those folks is actually on the call with us today, Mayor Gorsman. Don't know you very well, but I know of some of your work and how you've managed to achieve, I guess, some national coverage and, in the media and others with some of your initiatives. Talk to us a little bit about that. What made you even think to do that? How were you able to leverage your position as a small town mayor to get a national platform for some issues of importance to the Jewish community?
All right, so good afternoon. Thanks for having me. Thanks, Danny, and all the other panelists. I'll try to be brief since there's a lot of folks on the panel. But essentially, the way I've always tried to lead my life, and I think that Jews, observant or otherwise, should all lead their lives is the way in a strong, proud, and unabashed manner. And we should always use the tools at our disposal to advance things for our community and to protect our community. So when I became a council member 6 years ago and then a mayor 4 years ago, That's just when the anti-BDS movement was getting started. There was the state of South Carolina had passed an anti-BDS law, and an issue arose with the local church, and I decided to use the tools at my disposal to write and pass the first anti-BDS city ordinance in the country. That was back in 2015 already. But there's been several things since then, and it's incredible how when you do things in a strong and proud and unabashed way, others will take the lead or will follow the lead, and things will snowball very quickly. And this day and age with social media, access to media of all kinds, and therefore to the public all over the country or the world, is actually at our fingertips. So if we're doing the right things and we're loud about it, and people in our community in particular are always hungry for people to make the first move, and I think that it's been a great journey, and we're just getting started.
When you say you're just getting started, any thoughts of what's coming next, the various issues that you could, again, elevate to a national level with the local position?
Yeah, so the issue in the last year or so or 2 years has been pushing forward with a uniform definition of anti-Semitism, and it's not academic like some people think. There's different uses for it, particularly on college campuses, and to create protections for Jewish students in college campuses to give them the same space and protection that other groups have. So that's really the issue that's at the forefront. But really, at the end of the day, as a community, we're at a battle to protect the Jewish identity, our Jewish identity. And we're just coming off Hanukkah, and that's really what Hanukkah is about. Everybody on the panel knows that, and then in the group, I'm sure knows that. That's a battle that the reason we celebrate Hanukkah in the way we do is that it was a war that we were fighting, not just for our lives, but for the way we live our lives. I think that's the issue that all of us as Jewish leaders around the country are fighting for, which is making sure that the younger Jewish generation understands the importance of keeping their identity and their religion and their peoplehood, and of course the importance of Israel and Zionism and the role that it should play in our lives as Jews in the diaspora. And that's the fight of the day for all of us.
Thank you very much, Mayor Gorsman. So I'll direct the next question to Councilmember Isaac Salver, who's again been involved for many years in various local institutions. One of the things in reading your bio that I noticed is a lot of these organizations whose names I've heard, but frankly, I'm not sure exactly what they do. There's the Florida League of Cities, the Children's Trust. You're involved in a lot of these organizations. I think it would be great for our audience to understand some of the organizations you're involved with, and more specifically, again, how you can have an impact by getting involved in these various organizations.
Thanks, Avi. I appreciate that. And of course, as always, I want to give a chorus of tov to Danny Aqua, who, we've spent a lot of time, talking politics. I mean, I've been involved since 1999, and, it's come a long way. And I know that, Danny is always there to, share interesting information, insights, and the way he applies technology to his job and technology to the whole field of politics is truly amazing. I really wanted to highlight my involvement with the Florida League of Cities as I've just come off my presidency. It was a very, very unique year. But before I do that, I'll briefly touch on the Children's Trust, which I'm actually the longest sitting member of the Children's Trust now, and it's made up of 33 board members. Most of them are appointed by charter. The mayor of Miami, Dade County, other organizations. I'm a representative of the Miami-Dade County League of Cities, on the Children's Trust. And the Children's Trust, for the audience that is not familiar with it, is a taxing authority in Miami-Dade County that spends, I would say, about an average of 150 or $160 million a year on children and family programs outside of public school. So it could be, it could be after-school programs, summer programs, youth violence prevention, health. The Children's Trust has opened nursing facilities in over 150 public schools. So underserved neighborhoods and underserved children have access to at least a physician's assistant or a nurse in their school. So, but as far as the intersectionality of public service, and I'm going to use the Florida League of Cities as an example, and Yiddishkeit, for lack of a better label, has been very, very interesting, because that was one of the first organizations as an elected official I got involved with, which is the Florida League of Cities is basically an advocacy organization that is made up of elected officials from all 411 municipalities across the state. So you have municipalities in the Panhandle, northeastern Florida, central Florida, South Florida, all the different localities and municipalities coming together to really advocate for local self-government, local voices making local choices. So with that as a background, we have meetings several times a year for different reasons, but there are two major meetings. One is the Legislative Policy Conference, and the other is our annual convention, where we choose the board of directors every year and the officers every year. And as I went through the ranks of the Florida League of Cities, you start as a board member. Once in a while, you get appointed to the executive committee. Ultimately, in 2017, I became the second vice president. There's only three ruling officers: the second vice president, and president. And you kind of graduate up: second vice president, and then president. As an example of how accommodating the Florida League of Cities is, and mind you, they're located in Tallahassee, and a lot of those folks don't have a lot of exposure to Orthodox Jewry. They have been so awesome regarding food in the beginning, regarding scheduling meetings during Yom Tov. Once I became an officer, part of the administration's job was to make sure that all our activities didn't conflict with all the major holidays. And there was a point where they were calling me, the assistant administrator for the board of directors would call me up. They'd say, "Mr. President, is Purim a holiday that we can have a meeting on?" I said, "Well, you can have, technically you can have a meeting on Purim, but it's not in the spirit of things." And it was the experience. Once I was coming into the presidency, I had the executive director of the organization talk to me about my acceptance speech, because all of the main, all of the main installments, the installment of officers and our, banquet would be on Shabbos. And we discussed the whole concept of Shabbos microphone. And I shared a few articles, and he shared a few articles of me with the executive director, who is not Jewish. And after a little bit of discussion, he came to me and he said, "Isaac, having a kosher microphone is not in the spirit of things. It would be inconsistent with your behavior over the last 20 years. Even if it is kosher, you wouldn't want all your colleagues and all your friends from the Florida League, all 2,000 of them, to see you use a microphone on Shabbos, even if it is kosher." And that's the advice that I got from the executive director. So, to say, and I say this humbly, to say that, that a lot of the folks in administration who have no connection, they're not Jewish, they have no connection to Judaism, have a keen sense of what is allowed on Shabbos, what is allowed on Yontif, and they actually know what Yontif and Shabbos is. So it's truly an amazing thing. And just to finish up, I'd say, as a Chabadnik and as a Lubavitcher, I've often used my Shomer Shabbos behavior to makarov other Jews in general. not necessarily Orthodox Jews, but there are Jews. For example, in the year 2017, when I first got elected as an officer, the second vice president, I was saying Kaddish for my father. And I was able to get, and I'm not sure if Gabriel was there or not, but I was able to get a minyan at the hotel where we were having our annual convention in August. And I brought a Sefer Torah and we had a minyan, Mincha, Mariv, Chakras, Mincha, Mariv. It was amazing. So, it's been great. And, and I'm going to finish with this. It's the non-Jewish elected officials that respect what we do the most.
Well, thank you very much, Councilmember Salver. I'm going to note for the audience, for those who are participating, that there's a Q&A button on the bottom of your Zoom screen. If you press that Q&A and you type in a question that we don't cover here that you'd like one of our panelists to answer, we'll take a look at that towards, we have a few minutes at the end of this webinar for questions from the audience, so please take advantage of that. I'm going to switch gears for a second and turn toward the person on the panel that I know the longest, which is Commissioner and Vice Mayor Stephen Miner. It's almost a crazy story. Stephen and I used to play football on the streets of Staten Island. You're talking now 40 years ago. We were a very good team. And I kind of lost touch a little bit with Stephen, but then recently reconnected when I heard that he had been elected the commissioner in Miami Beach. And an amazing story. I think it came down to 2 votes. One of the things that struck me as Council Member Salver was speaking is, you have all these interesting stories, but I think for a lot of people, this almost seems like a different world. This question, well, okay, that's great for Council Member Salver and for Peter Deutsch and others, but I'm just a regular Joe. How do I even think about getting involved in politics? Well, until a couple of years ago, Stephen Miner was an SEC lawyer. I don't know that you were thinking about politics. I'd love to hear a little bit, Stephen, of your story. What made you even think that you could even have a chance of gaining an upset victory, in the commissioner race in Miami? What made you think to run for office? What's it been like? How does a person even go about running for office if people down here want to do this, in other cities, in other districts, in other areas?
Sure, and thanks, Avi. Yeah, and every good quarterback needs a great wide receiver, and you made me look good. So thanks for that, and thank you. A shout out to Danny Aqua and Teach Florida, incredible organization. It actually it's interesting what got me started. It's kind of twofold. One, like you said, I'm a family man, wife and 2 kids. I'm working full-time job with the SEC as an attorney in law enforcement, and I started getting involved on the local level, just trying to get things done. And I thought I could add some value in being on the commission, but also looking around, even though it's a nonpartisan position and you cannot run as a Republican or Democrat, just seeing what was going on in the country. I just thought it was important that to add a voice to, because if you don't have proper people representing you, if you don't have people in office who have similar values that you do, you're going to get decisions and legislation that does not comport with our values. So I thought it was important on that level to do it. And I decided to throw my hat in the ring. And one of the things I relied on, and certainly, Miami Beach is sort of split into South Beach, Mid Beach, and North Beach. But clearly, and I ultimately did very well. It's interesting because I did win by the 2 votes to get to the runoff. And then I actually won by 630 votes. And clearly, the Jewish vote, the Orthodox Jewish vote, was instrumental. I got 82% of the vote in Mid Beach, which is the Miami Herald even did a piece on that because it's so unheard of to win by that much. And the turnout was incredible. And it's something that people told me, you're not going to get people to come out to vote. You're not going to get the Orthodox Jews to come out to vote. And people did. I think people saw and recognized that there is a need to have representation, and people came out and voted in huge numbers. I mean, there were pictures on a Sunday of the voting. The lines were just incredible. So I have a Karsa Tov for the community of that. And so that was sort of the thinking. But it's interesting, when I was leading up to it, I would meet with a number of different people trying to formulate my final decision whether to run. And I actually met with someone who had run for mayor but lost. And he actually told me, looks at me, he's like, you're not going to wear your yarmulke though if you run. And I'm like, well, of course I'm going to wear my yarmulke. That's who I am. I actually told him it would hurt me if, first of all, I would never even think of doing that, but it would hurt me if I didn't, because people know who I am and it's not going to help. And I think ultimately people do respect. I think some of the comments we've heard, people do respect showing you listen to them. I think that's one, you hold yourself out as an ethical person, and you comport with that and actually live it. And they see it by the way I act and we legislate. And I think the whole body here is like that. And then ultimately you listen to residents and give them the respect that they deserve. And people obviously identify me as Orthodox, and I think they appreciate that. But just to give a couple of quick examples of why it's so important, and they're almost maybe seem like small examples, but I'll respond to anybody who reaches out. But certainly there are many people in the community who have my phone number directly. So shortly after I was elected, there were a number of churches and synagogues that had actually been attacked, and residents were reaching out to me, rightly concerned. So I was able to meet with our police chief and arrange for very high visibility police patrols during Friday night, Shabbos morning, and actually Sunday morning as well. There are a number of churches in Miami Beach as well. But and it was noticed. It was a very high visibility, and again, it made people feel better. Shabbos lights on 41st Street, they don't change unless a car comes into the side intersection. For years, I've heard people complain about it, and we were able to. So one of my first meetings was with a county commissioner, Eileen Higgins. We were meeting actually about something else, but I mentioned at the end of our meeting, within the week, she met with me with her signal person from Miami-Dade County, because it's actually county lights, and they switched it. And after years and years, I've heard about it probably for 10 years, why can't we get it changed? Literally within a week, we were able to change it. So again, it's having that representation in office. And I'll give another quick example. We did a food drive as well during COVID. I know Teach Florida did an amazing job. Mine was much smaller, but still we fed over thousands of meals. We got grants from the US government. And we worked with Tomchei Shabbos, which is a great organization. But one last quick story tells you about the representations. Right before Rosh Hashanah, must have been 20 minutes before Rosh Hashanah, I got a call from a rabbi saying, there are 5 different shofar blowings that are going to be outdoors in different parks around the city because of COVID. But we just realized we don't have any police presence, and maybe it's possible that they can swing by. So again, I didn't do anything that I don't think any other commissioner, but it was having the accessibility. This rabbi had my phone number. I called the police chief and it was done. He sent cars and had it done. So it's really just having that representation in office that I think has such an impact.
Thank you very much, Commissioner Minor. And again, I think the theme that we're hearing again and again throughout this conversation today is the impact that you can have, not just as an elected official, as one human, but as a community, and the importance of getting out the vote. Because I think a lot of us, and I'll include myself as guilty as charged in that, maybe we turn out for presidential elections, maybe for some of our US elections, but not necessarily for every local election. And I think it's critically important that as a community, we figure out ways to get the vote out. I do want to turn to Assistant Mayor Seth Salver, because I'd love to hear a little bit. I know, again, your father obviously set a great example and we heard from him before, but if you're a young person coming out of school and you want to get involved, you want to run, you want to start at the council level, tell us a little bit about what you did. How'd you register? What was the process? How did you campaign? What do you actually do, as in part of your role? I think it would be great just to hear an example.
Yeah, so when I first got involved with Bal Harbor, I was 25 years old, and that's when I launched my campaign. Before then, I had grown up going to council meetings in Bay Harbor, which is a neighboring municipality where my father is still elected. I would go with him, and I kind of got a sense for what the job entails. And, it's a smaller town, but it's still, our municipalities are the governments closest to the people. And it's really the government that has the most impact on your life in a way, because it's the streets that you drive on, it's the lights, like we just heard, the lights that we're stopping at. And specifically in Bal Harbor, I saw an opportunity because the demographics on the council at the time were such that, there was only one Orthodox Jewish member of the council. And the average age of the council was I would say 78, if not in the 80s. And as a young millennial starting to go to these meetings, which you'll find if you ever go to a local, if you live in Hollywood, Avi, or if anyone goes to their local meetings, they'll find that not many people frequent those meetings. And oftentimes, and the electeds could tell you this, that you feel like you're forced to side with a very vocal minority that's in the chambers at the time that something is being deliberated, when in fact, you have a whole community out there that's going to be impacted by the legislation that we're considering. And you have to remember that you have to represent them too. So it's something where if you start going to the meetings and you see, and there's obviously, in my situation, it was just something that I'd grown up doing. So when I moved to Bal Harbour, I started going to the meetings in Bal Harbour. But usually what drives people to these meetings is a specific issue. But if you follow through and see that there is a potential for you to make an impact and represent the Jewish community, which oftentimes, especially, I mean, we don't have to look too far back in the history of Bal Harbour. There was a time where Jews couldn't even own land in the village. And now I think our entire council is Jewish, and the mayor and myself are Orthodox. I mean, it's just an incredible reversal of how, and we were the first municipality to pass an anti-BDS ordinance. I mean, the founders of Bal Harbour are probably spinning in their graves at this point. But it's an incredible thing where we're able to make an impact and really represent an important constituency that the city of Miami Beach has, Bal Harbour, Bay Harbor, and other local municipalities in South Florida. We have, this is a very, South Florida is a very Jewish community, and we should be represented in the government.
Can you give an example of some of the things that you voted on? And again, just to set a concrete understanding of what you actually do, or the kinds of decisions that you can impact as a council member. What are some things?
So we were as the mayor pointed out earlier, we were the first municipality to pass an anti-BDS ordinance. But really, as a municipal body, we are voting, on a regular basis. In our situation, it's monthly. We have monthly meetings on legislation that impacts every citizen. Like, we're right now in the midst of there's the Bal Harbour Shops is expanding, and there's a lot of stuff going on with that. I can't really get into so much detail because of sunshine issues with the mayor and myself. But generally, anything that has to come before the body, we vote on. We're like the condo association for Bal Harbour, so to speak. So all the contracts.
Good analogy.
Yeah.
So I did one last question for you, Seth, before we're going to turn back to Peter. So I want to ask some questions on the national level. But somebody's watching this webinar, and they're a young person, man or woman out of school, and they start thinking, interesting. I could impact the local level, but they don't necessarily have a father like yours who maybe take your son or daughter to work day, showed you what it's like to attend a meeting. How would you recommend somebody get involved in local politics? Where do they even start, right? Is it to attend the meetings?
By going to the meetings, and then, seeing what sort of impact you'd like to have, and then creating, a lot of people don't know what goes on in these meetings. You yourself are asking me, like, what sort of decisions do you make? And everyone lives in a city pretty much, unless you're in an unincorporated part of a county. But even so, the county still has say in everything that happens in your life. So you just have to find an issue that's meaningful and find a platform that you think you can get people around you to support you. And really, I mean, I'm lucky that Bal Harbour is not such a big city, but still, I mean, I had to run for office, and I was lucky I got 70% of the vote at the time. I beat out an 83-year-old when I was 26, which was great. But it's just a matter of getting a group of people behind you. And Danny Aqua is someone that he's always advised me down the line, and it's someone that anyone who's considering running for higher office should definitely speak to Danny and strategize with him.
Great. All right. Well, thank you very much, Seth. Peter, just turning back to you. I mean, I think one of the and we have a couple of audience questions coming in, so as you answer them, I'll take a look. But turning back to you at this question of getting out the vote, I think we saw the importance of getting out the vote. I mean, if you look even at the recent presidential election, it came down to essentially a very small margin of victory where Biden won pretty much because of certain communities that really turned out in numbers that they hadn't before. Do you have any thoughts, at the national level, at the local level about, this issue of getting out the vote? What have you seen? What have you observed in all your years about how just the ability to turn out your vote is among one of the most important determinants of what happens, in the electoral process?
I think that the success of the group that's sponsoring this call is the system working. had the election for governor gone a different way, the tone of this meeting and the tone of the organization would have been much different. As someone who has been very supportive of school choice and is a Democrat, it was a very significant challenge, to try to, get any kind of position out of the Democratic nominee for governor in Florida. So, it's our government. I mean, it's our, it's our future. I mean, if one of the beauties of politics is that it's not far away. I mean, it's real. It's real people. You can go to town meetings when they used to exist, or you can be on Zoom calls, or you can call. And there's so many stories of people running for office just because they're running for office because they didn't like something and winning and being successful. You're not going to be successful all the time, but the same advice that I have given any person that ever asked me for advice, if you care about it, you can make a difference. I want to mention two quick things, though, just to emphasize some of the other comment. First off, just the level of accommodation in terms of people who are Shomer Shabbos is incredibly good and almost bizarre at some level in terms of how blessed we are to be Americans. I mean, some funny stories in a sense that while I was in Congress, I attended. I was trying to remember how many, not multiple, but maybe 2 state dinners where kosher food at state dinners was not an issue. I was not the only one asking for kosher food at a state dinner. It was somewhat embarrassed in terms of coming to a table with my wife in an airline package where they then took it back and unwrapped it and brought it back again. So it's a little bit nicer. But there's this incredible thing in terms of travel that in the Federal Register, which basically is the regulations of the United States government, when federal officials are scheduled to take trips that are where there's a federal airplane taking the trip, literally in the Federal Register, it says that if a federal official can't take that trip because of religious reasons, they can fly commercial generally before the trip, and it literally actually says, if it's overseas, business class, which is kind of a interesting story. So I mean, I have some travel stories related to that where I had some wonderful accommodations in terms of that travel.
Thank you, Peter. I will, as I mentioned before, we asked our audience members to submit some questions, and I'm looking at a couple. I'll pick one of them because I think it's I'm not familiar with the exact situation, but one of our audience members writes in that the Florida Bar Board of Bar Examiners would not accept a well-qualified applicant because the applicant was Shomer Shabbat, and much of the work of the board was on Saturday. I'd be curious if one of our panelists can talk a little bit about that. I'm not familiar with the example here, but there probably are some bodies that are affiliated with various institutions, maybe government or quasi-government, that do a lot of their work on Shabbat, right? Potentially because of the fact that maybe a lot of the people involved have jobs during the week. Have you guys run into situations like that where there have been professional opportunities or other organizations that don't necessarily deny people, but the fact that the work is on Saturday, if you can't do the work on Saturday, kind of rules you out, and how have you handled that? So we'll start with you, Peter, since you're live.
I think the question becomes, and I guess the earlier comment of what's in the spirit of Shabbos and what's halacha. It might not be in the spirit of Shabbos to be at a meeting, but if you're not writing, you're not traveling. I mean, during some situations, I mean, I wasn't the head of the organization. When I ran for the Senate, there were debates, let's say on a Saturday night in Orlando, where I basically stayed in a hotel where the debate was over Shabbos. So I was available to speak immediately after Shabbos, which was clearly inconvenient, but you know what? They weren't going to accommodate me very much. And so I would, I mean, I think there's legal issues in terms of First Amendment rights that people have regarding governmental entities discriminating against religious practice. So there's some really good attorneys that, and generally these cases, are private attorney general action. I mean, if someone has a specific case like that, I can make some recommendations of attorneys that are experts in this area. But if anything, the protection of religious freedoms in America has gotten dramatically stronger in the Trump presidency because of the recent Supreme Court picks.
Okay, thank you, Peter. So there's another question from an audience member who was asking about practical questions about running for office and, how to avoid fear. I'm sure any of our panelists can take it, but I'm going to turn back to Mayor Gorsman. Again, we'd just like to hear a little bit about how you don't seem like a very fearful guy, but I'm kind of curious about the decision to run. When you run for something, there's also the possibility that you might lose. So what were your thoughts, when you started running for office and coming to terms with the idea that, hey, I might win, I might lose, and any advice you have for others who maybe not as bold or considering it?
Sure. So the first comment I'll say about the previous discussion, which is about really the topic, I think, of the overarching topic of the panel, which is being Orthodox in office. Just in one sentence, I'll say being an observant Jew, which is how I consider myself. An observant Jew in office is the same as being an observant Jew out of office. The same challenges and negatives and positives and difficulties and opportunities that present us for deciding to live our lives in a certain way are the same. And frankly, like Isaac Salver said, I deal with anti-Semitism all the time on big issues. But when we're talking about personal issues on accommodations and such, I've experienced almost without exception incredible warmth and openness from everybody, all the non-Jews that I've dealt with on any of these issues. In fact, unfortunately, most of the issues that I have about being an observant Jew in my private and public life come from other Jews, not from non-Jews. So with regards to answer that question, that's from Rabbi Fried. Hi, Rabbi. Listen, it's the same as everything in life. I feel like that's a question my kids ask me all the time if they should try out for a certain team or a certain club, and should you try if you're going to fail? And it's the same. You can't hit a home run if you don't swing the bat. So I think that that with time you realize that every opportunity, that every action you take has its own benefits, and if you win, then you have the opportunity of serving. If you don't, then you have the opportunity of having had the experience of running and understanding what that process is like. So you'll always gain something from it, and definitely run. Obviously, you got to look to see if you have a chance. Look at my district, for certain races. If I'm a Republican, which I am, then I have issues that are difficult to overcome, and you got to make smart choices. But fear of failure shouldn't really be.
So thank you very much, Mayor Gorsman. Commissioner Minor, who's I guess our newest elected official in that sense, talk a little bit about how you overcame your fear of losing, but equally important, the specifics of, okay, you decide to run for office. How'd you even know what process to follow, where to register to run for office, what it even means to launch a campaign as a person who's never run for office before?
Yeah, and I may be a good example because I was literally a no name. I was not particularly active. I was on one committee that the mayor had appointed me to, but I wasn't particularly a known entity in Miami Beach. So I was a no name. I raised very little money, especially compared to my competitors. So you kind of have to use the advantages you have, and you realize, and partly it's luck. I had people who were trying to introduce me and saying introducing me to consultants, and they wanted $100,000, which I clearly did not have to throw at the campaign. And you learn a lot as you go along, that there's so many people willing to help you that you don't have to pay anything. The Miami Beach clerk's office, for example, I just went down there and said, "Can I meet with you?" And they sat with me for hours to go over the process. They would have done this for any candidate, and I didn't need to spend $10,000 on a lawyer that some people were hinting to me that I needed to do. So you kind of just reach out and call people. Most people are really willing to help you, and it doesn't matter if they're Jewish, non-Jewish. People respect that. I'm going to echo sort of what Mayor Gorsman was saying. People respect the process. They respect the fact that you're throwing your hat in the ring and willing to put yourself on the line. You really are putting a little bit, but if you have nothing to hide, it's really a great process, win or lose. And I joked with my wife. She used to say, do you have any fears? This is during the campaign. I said, I have two. One is that I'm going to get blown out. I'm going to get embarrassed. And two is I'm going to lose by one vote. And that almost, that second one almost happened. But you realize that people are really open, and you got to use the advantages you have. One of the major advantages I had was that we know a lot of people just from the community. I had probably 500 yard signs that I put out on lawns. People told me, without an official record, people within the city told me that nobody ever came close to that many signs, not even close. I clearly broke all the records because I didn't have that much money to spend, but it was everyone driving through Miami Beach, particularly Mid Beach, but I also had South Beach. I also had pockets in North Beach. Anyone driving through saw my signs, and without that, it would have been impossible to win. One of the last point, actually, there were 3 different forums that were taking place. They're kind of like debates, but they're the candidate forums, which were absolutely instrumental for me because, again, being sort of a not known quantity, and some of these forums, 100 residents would show up or more. So I needed to be there to show my face. And 3 of them were on the night that the holiday was ending. So I called up the moderators, and one, I realized I wasn't going to be able to move the date. I tried, but they said they could not move the dates. But I asked if my panel can be last, so this way I could at least have the time to get there. And nobody had a problem. They all agreed. And sometimes I was kind of the last speaker. I literally showed up as the forum was ending, but people got to hear me. And I think actually people respected the fact that I actually had people tell me. They respected the fact that I made the opportunity, even though they knew it was my holiday, that I made sure that I came and at least presented my ideas and thoughts and sort of my platform to be commissioner.
Thank you, Commissioner Minor. So again, what I'm hearing coming through loud and clear from all of our panelists today is that there's really nothing different from just living your life as an observant Jew than being in political office as an observant Jew, and it's not something that's a major obstacle or should get in your way. So certainly if anyone has an inclination, you should do it. I think what I'm also hearing is the impact that we can have as a community and as individuals, and so it's important to get involved. One of the requests I'll make to all of our panelists is, due to the lunch hour and today being a weekday, I think we have a limited number of live participants, but I'm sure the folks at Teach Florida will circulate this webinar, and we may get some folks watching it. If you have people out there that are interested in running for office, maybe whether it's in Boca or Boynton or other places where there's Jewish communities, please reach out to our panelists, and hopefully they'll help you and be willing to give you some words of advice and wisdom as to how to get involved in local office. We only have a few minutes left, and so I'm just gonna, at this point, I think we've covered most of our questions. Just kind of go around, see if there's any sort of last comments or thoughts from our panel since we're live with you right now. Stephen, I'm sorry, go ahead.
I'll be quickly. Yeah, in response to the Mr. Freed, who was asking about the fear of losing. I ran for the first time in 1998, 1 year before I was elected, because we have elections every year. Although it's a 4-year term, but they're staggered, the seats are staggered or whatever. Anyhow, I had an idea, although my motivation to run, was to help the community. We were going through a large enhancements project or whatever. I spoke to a consultant who consulted with me for free. And he was a very popular consultant at the time. I'm not going to mention his name. He's passed away since then. But he says, Salver, you need like a shtick. You need you need like a platform, like a punch, because it's very difficult to unseat. All of the gentlemen on this panel know it's very difficult to unseat an incumbent. I know that Peter Deutsch knows it's very difficult to unseat an incumbent. So Bay Harbor Islands is a unique municipality because we're the only municipality in Dade County with a toll plaza. We have our own toll plaza. We actually manage and own that toll plaza by, the Florida legislature. And, so, a lot of people were complaining, Isaac, you want my vote? Get rid of the toll, get rid of the toll, get rid of the toll. And I didn't really do a lot of homework about how important the toll was for Bay Harbor's economy. So my election in 1998 was vote for Isaac Salver, no more tolls. I was going to eliminate a cash cow for the city. Okay. And it was, and it was a crazy election. I lost, but I didn't get murdered. I lost by like 50 votes. Just to give you an idea of, relative the numbers, the incumbent got 225 votes to my 175 votes. So there's always, just as a rule, there's always a group of people that are against the incumbent, no matter who. You can run a vegetable against a human being, and the vegetable will get a constituency to back them, because there are just some people that want change. But you do have, my advice is do your homework. Choose a good race. And that's another thing. Open seats are kind of like the best races for new folks, but you need to choose your race wisely and do your homework, go to the meetings, understand what the issues are, and you got to go for it. There's always risk in everything that you do, but if fear of losing is in your mind, that shouldn't be the reason you don't run.
Thank you very much, Councilmember Salver. And I think, again, what we've heard when we hear those numbers, 225 to 175, again, it starts bringing it home that with politics, you very often have to start somewhere. And, your friends, your family can probably put you in office with some of these races with the types of numbers that we're talking about. And so it's not crazy to think that you two could run for office. Again, we just have a couple of minutes left. In fact, I think we're at the hour, so we wanted to stay within that. I think what we'll probably do is hand it back to Danny just to thank everyone. And if we missed anyone or any thoughts from our panel members, I apologize. But we heard a lot of great content today, and we really very much appreciate you all taking your time out of your busy days to join us. And Danny, I will hand it back to you.
Thank you, Avi. And when I asked you to host this, I didn't realize that you're a superstar moderator. So I really appreciate you managing the whole panel. And I appreciate both you and all our panelists for taking time out of their very busy days. When you are in elected office, oftentimes you're doing two jobs, your full-time job and then your public service. So it really means a lot that you took an hour out. Now, during this panel, we focused a lot on elected office or running for office or things like that. But I want to emphasize, especially Deutsch, Florida, just being a voice, an advocate for things that you're passionate about and care about can be even more meaningful, because as Councilmember Salver mentioned, 500 people that voted, there are even less people that show up at the meetings to express their voice. And I think everyone here has been an amazing voice for the Jewish people, and we really thank you. They're available, our panelists, to help you if you ever have issues or face issues. I saw one question about someone that had an issue. Please reach out to me next week. We're also here to advocate for you. And we're doing this event in conjunction actually with our crowdfunding matching campaign, trying to raise funds for our organization, Teach Florida, and advocate for our Jewish day school security funding and the free kosher food program that we've been working on through the state. So any information on that, you can also reach out to me. But thank you again to all our panelists so much. And thank you, Avi, for hosting. Bye, everyone.